Welcome to Seven Stones Radio.
I'm Vikram Diol and my co-host Lori Ross, and we are...
The Odd Couple!
One of these days we're going to get that right, Lori.
It's okay. We are odd.
Yeah, I think our odd intro just explains to people how odd we really are.
Well, we're a little off, too, so that makes sense.
You are in Seattle, and I am in California.
Yes.
So, and Mercury's still in retrograde.
I know. It goes direct on Sunday, though. I'm so excited. And it's a new moon on Monday, so...
Still have no idea what any of that means. Oh, but I will be flying on. So I guess I'll be flying under a new moon, which is exciting.
Yeah.
I'll be close to the moon.
You know, if people are interested with business and the moon cycles, there's literally people that will do stock markets and all of their whatever they do in the stock. See, you're the business guy. What happens in the stock market? They'll make their trades and stuff based on different moon cycles and all their kind of decisions. So Google that. It's actually really interesting that people utilize the nature and its natural cycles to decide whether or not to buy or sell. So a little fun fact there.
I did not know that.
Yeah. It's pretty darn interesting. Anyway, how are you doing today?
Spirituality runs deep in the business.
Yes, it does.
I'm outstanding.
Yeah?
It's been a cool couple of days. Some big announcements were made or some big conversations were had, and some big things are in the works right now for me, or maybe not necessarily big in the sense of I'll be doing stuff, but just big because it allows me the freedom of letting go of some things so that I can continue moving forward with other things.
Yeah, and sometimes the little steps really make the big changes, so, you know.
It's a pretty big step.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. I know you want to wait until everything's kind of set to talk about it, but yeah, things have been going great with me as well and my business, and it's spring energy right now, so it's a little intense. Things start to kind of pick up and move a little bit faster.
Right.
But yeah, things are going really well. So what do you want to talk about today?
Well, we spent a few minutes prior to this, and I believe you're the better note taker than I am. I'm the reader and the talker, and you're the spiritual channeler and the writer.
And the writer. Well, I know that you had a Facebook Live event last night, and you were talking about giving, and so I thought that would be to kind of piggyback on that. I thought giving and receiving, which you and I also talked about, throw a little bit of value in there, and worthiness. And I also want to talk a little bit about prosperity, particularly as it pertains to money, because prosperity can mean many different things. But how to diagnose kind of where you're at and maybe why there's some blocks to why you are not receiving the amount that you think that you should be receiving, kind of in the head, like you have a number in your head, but maybe the heart thinks otherwise. We can talk about that later, but let's talk a little bit about what you discussed last night in giving and maybe what some of the feedback was from your followers.
So it's funny, you always tell me that I'm a regurgitator of information, but I always seem to pick up books or listen to podcasts based off of what's in my brain. So it's like my ether is putting out these different things that I should be listening to or reading. And so I had a conversation with somebody who I told on Monday of last week that I would read a book called The Go-Giver. And it's a book that I've read a few times before. And one of the things that they talk about is giving and receiving and your true value, what you're worth. And these were all things that I was having because I'm having some pretty deep conversations with people right now about life and about, some business propositions. And so yesterday, at the end of each chapter, they say you have to do these exercises, otherwise it doesn't become concrete. It doesn't become real. You can read theory all day long, but until you put it into practice, it's just theory, and knowledge isn't power, execution is. So I decided to go on Facebook and talk about having a giving mindset. And, giving comes in, in your world, giving is what you do. It's all you do. It's like, oh my God, I had to do a Reiki session for this person, and they didn't have any money to pay me, but they gave me a great hug, and I'm like, okay, but you can't pay.
Right.
You got to get a little bit more than a hug.
Right, and that's very common in kind of the spiritual practitioners, because they kind of view money as more earth based, and but it is a form of energy exchange. And I after meeting you, and after kind of I was already on this evolution of accepting money and not seeing it as a bad thing, but it boiled down to my self-worth. And a lot of these people, they get their fix, their high off of helping people, but at some point it becomes out of balance and the scales tip, because they've just give, and then it starts to take a physical toll, and like their outside world is out of balance. So anyway, so go ahead.
No, and this whole giving and receiving and self-worth and value, I'm just writing some notes as we go along to kind of keep us on track, because I'm looking outside, and I'm actually at my parents' house for a couple of weeks as I'm transitioning from Seattle down to California and figure out exactly what I need. And the universe told me, you need to stop at your folks' house for a couple of months and work on the relationship and work on the communication. And so, when I look at self-worth and I look at giving and receiving, it's what have I been given in my life, and what have I received in my life, and what have I given back in my life, and what do I allow other people to receive from me. And it does come back to how you perceive yourself and your value and your self-worth. And a lot of the values of self-worth that we have come from our childhood, come from the environment around us, come from the teachers that we had, come from the...
Absolutely. Culture plays a big role in that too as well. Give.
The motto we were talking about earlier, it's better to give than to receive. And yes, it is.
I think that's out of balance. I think it has to be balanced. I feel like the giving and the receiving has to be the same. There has to be an equal exchange. That's kind of one of the laws of the universe. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so when you're just going action, and there's no opposite, you're out of alignment with the cycles of the laws of the universe.
And, it's so true. Like, you can be the nicest person that gives everything, but if you're not open to receiving, you're not going to get anything in return, and you're still going to be you might be content, but you're in one aspect of your life, but there's another aspect of your life which you're not happy in, because if you can't provide for the people you care about, how can you be truly happy, right?
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, because it's so funny, because you and I talked earlier, because you are on this thing about giving, which will bring you back, because you've received a lot. Like, as you stated, you've received a lot. So giving kind of helps you bring you back into balance, right? And so, I'm on the opposite spectrum, where I'm trying to get the people around me to receive. Like most of my clients, when I do intuitive readings, they are terrified of doing stuff for themselves, because they think it's so selfish. And I'm like, no, it's the opposite. It's self-full. There has to be a radical change, because you've been so out of balance giving for so long. There has to be a kind of a radical change in the other direction. And eventually you become towards the middle, and you become very balanced, where there's like, oh, I get a massage once a month or whatever. And you realize that there has to be self-care, and there has to be things coming in, and it doesn't have to always be things, and, but allow people to give you services, and to offer you praise, and to give you what they can, so that they can now, be rewarded for the giving, because it fills them up too to give. It really does.
And that's the part of the thing that, it's better to give to receive. However, we should teach the young, and we should teach ourselves, because we've all been programmed in certain ways. It is better to give than receive. However, you have to always be open to receiving from others, because they want to give too. So if you're the only one giving, you're almost selfishly taking away their ability to have the same level of contentment and enjoyment with giving that you get. Because I know for me, if I go and take my, I was at an event, and it was December. It was a beautiful sunny day in Florida. These are with people that I truly care about. A couple of, there's about 10 people on the table, and there's people on the table who I've never met before, but, it was a really good vibe. and something just said, pick up the bill. Like, it wasn't a question that I thought. I wasn't trying to plan it out. I wasn't trying to do anything deceitful, but there's a couple of people on the table who've picked up the bills in the past, and it wasn't like, oh, I owe you this or you owe me that, but it was just kind of like pick up the bill. So I just threw out my credit card before anybody saw it, and then I left. I didn't ask for anybody, and then when the bill came out, the lady, everybody was pulling out their money, and I get a text message. He said, "You little shit." And I just started laughing. I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You didn't have to do that." I said, "I know I didn't, but I wanted to, and it felt good." And he's like, "Thank you."
Oh, that was very kind of you. And I think that happens a lot. I mean, specifically with money, and not just receiving goods, but specifically with money and receiving that, it makes people uncomfortable. It's kind of interesting to watch and observe, like, because people are so prideful and they don't want to ask for help. But then you have kind of the opposite, where these, not all children are like this, but I see it, kind of culturally, that, parents nowadays, I don't like to speak in broad terms. Some parents, the kids receive so much, they don't know how to give back. They just don't. And so, you see them kind of struggle as they get older to even connect and have compassion for other people and for themselves. Because then they kind of become helpless because everything's been handed to them and there has been no action to actually, to create that balance again and for themselves. But,
and I was going to touch on that. It's easy for some people that have been given a lot, and a lot is a very specific term to that person. A lot could be I have a roof over our head, or a lot could be like I grew up in the back of Rolls Royces. So a lot is really
I know, isn't that interesting perspective?
Because, to me, I've been given, I would say, more than enough. My whole life, I've had more than enough. I mean, my parents live in a beautiful house; they always have, and I always know that I have a place to come home to that's going to have meals on the table all day long. Like, I never have to worry about coming home. I never have to worry about bringing friends over. And that my house was the party house in high school because my mom wanted to keep an eye on us. But it was also the party house because we knew that we could come over, open the fridge, and it was like Costco was stocked in there. And my mom was talking the other day. She said, I'm off tangent here, but she's like, do you kids know how much you cost growing up feeding you? And I'm like, well, Mom, you fed an army. She's like, I guess it wasn't so expensive then.
Well, and I think my kids are hyper aware because my husband and I had a family really young. And so we didn't have a lot of money. I think we were, I was 19 years old, 20 years old, and we were already having a family, and we didn't know what we were doing. And so my kids are kind of the opposite. So they're hyper aware. So they don't even ask for things because they worry. We're fine now, but it's been programmed in them that they had to be hyper aware of our budget. And so I always wonder how that's going to play out when they're older, because I don't want them to, because I knew that was kind of, I was learning about the prosperity mindset and all that stuff and all these blocks. I didn't learn that until my early 30s. And so I'm having to kind of reprogram my children because we grew up, with our basic needs met. And I thought that was good. But, you'd struggle a little bit when it came to the extracurriculars. And so, I had to reach out for help a lot for that. But it's interesting what I'm hearing from you is you have the ability to kind of create new desires because your basic needs were already met. So you're kind of one ring up on a lot of other people, and you didn't even realize it at the time, I'm sure, right?
Right.
So your basic needs were completely met, so you didn't even think about it. Whereas, my family was hyper aware. I'm sure your parents were more aware of it than you were. But
I went to boarding school in India for 2 years, and the first year, my basic needs were not met. From where I came, I went. It was quite a different world. It was, I went from having everything to the first year of school. We didn't have running water, and the toilets didn't flush, and the food was just, my parents. I don't know if they accept the reality of what it was, but it was a different story. I mean, I had health issues. There wasn't running water for showers all the time. I mean, and so it was a much different world than what I came from.
I almost see that as a blessing for you, to be able to, because we've kind of been at the extreme poverty level, at points in our life, and then we've also been at a level where we were doing really well and thriving, and that's where we're back to now. You can connect with so many more people, and because people want to connect with people that understand, right? They want to understand the low, that you've experienced the low of the low, and that just makes you a better messenger, a better healer, a better motivational person, But anyway, continue. Your story's fascinating.
No, I mean, it obviously shaped me because, my parents didn't purposely put us in that school. But I was going through some pictures a couple of weeks ago, and I remember, people climbed down the back of the boarding house at our first school down the pipes, and we used to throw money to the neighborhood kids, and they would go get us food and throw the food bags back up, and then we'd give them more money. And, it's weird. I'm like, why didn't they steal the money? Because they could have, but we had actually, coming from America, $1 in Indian standards was like a ton of money for them, and it was nothing for us. So we'd give them a couple bucks as a tip, not thinking it was a lot of money, just because it was good food. But it really. I look back at that time, and at first I really hated it, and I still think there's some mental blocks when I go towards India, because I actually get profusely sick. Because as a child,
it's memory. It's like muscle memory. Isn't that interesting?
I mean, the 2 times I've gone back to India with my parents after boarding school, I've literally gotten so sick that I should have been hospitalized both times.
But it's interesting that what I hear you saying is also, look at all the people that I got to help, because I gave them a couple dollars, which was a lot for them, and maybe they went home and they were able to feed their family for the week or something. I mean, you have no idea that the impact that you had, even though maybe you were miserable in the moment, your ripple went out way farther than you could ever even imagine.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that.
Yeah. Well, I always say the universe or God or whatever you want to call it puts us in these situations. And I had a client that would complain about the turnover about her department, and she worked for Boeing, and she had no idea about, she had no control over that because Boeing has unions and stuff. And I said, well, what I hear you saying is that God was able to put so many people in contact with you because you're highly talented, you're highly organized, and it made them, gave them a higher bar and made them a better person. And she goes, I never thought about it that way. It's like, no, you had this revolving door that you were able to touch and help so many more people. So if you had the same set of people maybe for 10 years, I think it would have been, it would have gotten stagnant. But you had this revolving door of being able to help more people and motivate more people. So it's all about perspective, let me tell you.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to what we were talking about with self-worth and value systems, I think we got off tangent with that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
The message will always come out the way it's supposed to.
Exactly. Totally agree with you on that one. And it's I used to think that I wasn't worthy to travel because I hadn't created enough prosperity yet in my life, and I wasn't worthy enough to be at these events. And, coming from me and hearing it from other people that have had more and or less of a family upbringing that was closer to mine or not, a lot of people have struggled through this, and they come across as like the happiest people, but when they go home, because we all go home and take our pants off one leg at a time, they still struggle with this feeling of self-worth and this feeling of value. And am I worthy enough? Am I good enough to have a job that pays this much more? Am I worthy enough to have a family like this? Am I worthy enough to have this type of a lifestyle? And they're giving people. They're truly very giving, open-minded, open-hearted people. They just were told as, whatever they were told or whatever their beliefs were, for whatever reason they might not have been told anything. It could have been the culture they lived in, that it's always better to give than to receive, or the way that their parents gave was in such a way that they didn't feel that was authentic to them. And so they have these inner struggles as they're given more and more abundance in life. And some people are truly scared of success. And I never thought that was true, but they hit these limitations where it's like, for me, I always hit a limitation, a financial limitation was right around what I thought my dad earned. And
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, he's he earns a lot of money. He's very successful. He works his ass off. I mean, my little brother is now in rotations, and he's like, wow. He called my dad up on Monday or Tuesday or something, and he's like, told my mom, he's like, Dad really works hard. He's like, I'm exhausted every night, and Dad does this every single day and doesn't even get to sit down ever. And he's like, holy crud. Like, he's like, I'm exhausted every day. And my mom just chuckled. She's like, yeah, your father works his tail off. Like, he's definitely not a lazy human being, but
I think that you can get to that place too by practicing and kind of putting yourself in a situation. You and I talked a little bit about biohacking last week, and I don't want to go into that too much, but you can create a new kind of stamina. You just kind of as when I do a lot of hiking, the first time I go out for the season, I suck at it, and I feel like this is way too much. But then as I keep doing it and keep the wheels in motion, I just kind of create this momentum, and I can go faster and farther and longer and do it every day as opposed to in the beginning. So your dad just created this wonderful, system for himself that he just works really hard and he's able to do it, and he probably makes people look really lazy in comparison.
But what I was getting at is that in my head, my self-worth was, for some reason, I had this limitation in my mind where I didn't want to produce, or I didn't think I was capable of earning and producing more than what I thought he does. And I don't know what he does. Like, I don't ask him for his financials. But in my mind, I see, okay, he's probably earning around here. And that's where my business, if my business does plus or minus 5 or 10% of that, and my business probably did plus or minus 5 or 10% of that for the last couple of years. But we kind of hit this plateau. And I didn't know why, because I'm like, we're working harder, da-da-da-da-da. And then it makes sense because it was my value that I had on it. And so as I've been going through this last 6, 7, 8 months of my life where I've been really digging deep into the different chords in my body, and I don't want to say that that's something that is in our audience's heads and minds and hearts. I just feel that it's very easy for us to say, I'm only worth this much. So if I start getting to that position, it starts to make people actually feel uncomfortable.
Well, I had a similar experience about, I don't know if I talked about this before, but my mom was like Betty Crocker growing up. And, she basically gave too much, which in hindsight, I thought that was being perfect, giving so much. And when I had my own children, I really emulated my success, what it looked like as a mother compared to her. And if I didn't bake and decorate for every holiday and like make cute little whatever Easter baskets, like I was failing. And my mom finally gave me permission one day, and I cried to her. I called her up. I was like, I can't do this. I'm not doing it as well as you did. And she goes, Lori, you're not me. And I was like, I never had thought about it that way. We are completely different human beings. And once she kind of gave me that permission to let go of all these preconceived notions of what success looked like as a parent, I was able to move forward and create my own. Like I do more travel, I do more adventure, I communicate with more people, where she's a stay-at-home homebody, and I'm not that person. So it was just very freeing. It was very freeing, and I kind of went on a self-discovery of figuring out who I was, which was kind of fun, right?
Always fun to figure out who we are, right?
Yeah, I know, and it feels great. I love being in my 30s. I have to say that.
Yeah, 30s have been fun.
Yeah, I love it.
30s have been real fun.
I give less fucks is what I'm trying to say.
Whoa! Was that the first F-bomb of the show?
It might be. I don't know.
I
win. No.
One of the things we were talking about too is when people. I've seen this in my life, so I don't know if it happens often or not. It seems, though, in some of the circles I've run in, is that it's tit for tat. It's keeping track. Okay, I paid for dinner today. You pay for dinner tomorrow. I'll get Starbucks. You get a drink. I got the Uber, you get the Lyft. It's very, you do one, I do the other. And
I think you said scorecard earlier, keeping a scorecard.
Trying to think of the word that it was. And we scorecard a lot of things, and it's hard to move forward if you're always keeping track of what you did yesterday.
Right. And
there's going to be relationships with people that you might financially pay for more, but they might give you something that's so deep and awesome. I mean, I think about a relationship I have with a friend who, she actually was a client. She bought a home from me. Then, we always had this funny banter together, but she's just a good person.
I think we should mention that you're in real estate. Or I don't think we've ever talked about that. But yes, anyway.
Yeah,
Very successful.
Sold some houses up in Seattle and then built a team, and now on the verge of partnering with some great, amazing human beings to run that portion of what I've helped create, with some of them with their help, others without their help, but partnered with some really awesome, really, really exciting people to work that business as I move on to my next journey in life. And so that's something that I haven't actually said out loud, I don't think, to anybody but a few people. So that's actually really freaking exciting.
Woohoo, you heard it here.
Hopefully this drops in a couple weeks when everything's already done.
Yeah, but, it will. This is not our first show, so.
But I lost.
You had a client that bought homes from you.
And so she is she's in the legal services world, and she helps me with all of these legal contracts, and she reviews things for me. And I always say, I've never actually offered her any money because, for whatever reason, I was just like, it never felt like I needed to for whatever reason. The universe didn't say anything. And then the other day I was like, oh my God, like you're doing 10, 20, 30 hours worth of work and your hourly billing is really high. And she actually just left the corporate job and is now working on her own. So I'm like, I know what that's like. And she said, you provided so much value to me in my life and helped me with so many things that like the least I could do is help you with a couple of easy contracts. And I know she's downplaying how easy they are because nothing that I do when it comes to contracts is easy. They're every scenario is put into it, so they become very long and intense. But it was interesting that she said that because I was like, wow, that's the universe right there saying it's not always about money. Sometimes they give it back to you in different ways, and it's kind of interesting to see how this all plays out.
No, and I think that you make a good point about people's, well, I don't know if it's people's value or people's kind of energy exchange, and everybody's value is different, and therefore their exchange looks different. What's valuable to them is different than what's valuable to us, and so everybody's exchange rate, I guess, if you look at it, what they can give. Because I know that we talked about, I think you and I had a conversation once about love languages, right? What's your love language? And you assumed I can't remember what they were, but I'm definitely a service person. I love to offer services like, clean for you, cook for you, offer you an energy healing session and stuff like that. That's really my love language. And so when that to me is, if I can offer that over money and that's, something that they need, I don't mind doing money at all, but that's just
throwing that out there, universe.
What's that?
Just throwing that out there to the universe.
No, but I definitely understand too that when I'm doing a session on somebody, I do trades here once in a while, but as I'm trying to build my business, I need the capital, I need the money, and so right now my only I do have a barrier that says only money right now, and so depending on if I want to do a trade or not, but so right now it's I am accepting a money exchange for what I'm doing, so therefore I'm attracting a different clientele that only can kind of give me money for what I need. So there's that as well. That was kind of random. Sorry.
That's why we're the odd couple.
We are the odd couple.
Did we mention that today's Friday the 13th?
No, but it won't air Friday the 13th, but dun dun dun.
It recorded on Friday the 13th.
I know.
Not that matters, because Friday the 13th is, I don't know who made that a taboo date, but really,
well, I mean, 13 is a very auspicious number, and Friday is actually named after the goddess Freya, I think, and so she's kind of the goddess of kind of celebration and partying, and so it's just kind of, it's just kind of a fun day. Who knows what's going to happen?
Is today all about hookers and blow?
No. Oh my gosh. You're horrible. Oh, okay. Anyway.
I have no filter. It's Friday the 13th.
It is. Oh no. Don't use that as an excuse. But I wanted to talk a little bit. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Because I want to talk a little bit about prosperity diagnosis.
Well, yeah, just before we change topics, because I know in your world, from what you've shared with me and from what I've seen, and even in my world where, I'm in the service industry. I've always been in the service industry. I've offered my services, my skill set, in exchange for financial services, aka money.
Money.
And it's something that we don't like talking about. People in the service industry, people in the spiritual industry, in the spiritual world, in the healing world, whatever you want to call it that you're in, don't necessarily like to talk about what their fees are. They like to, in your world, they call it donations. In my world, we call it a commission or a service charge or a fee, and they always seem to get buried into the bottom line. And it's like, if you provide more value than you're being paid for, you should be open to talking about your service fee at the beginning of the conversation. And if you truly believe in your service and your value, then you should truly believe that every penny you're getting paid is well worth it. And in fact, you should actually be getting paid more than what you charge because of your service. And if you think about some of the great restaurants, the reason why they're so great isn't necessarily because of the food they offer. If you think, when I bought a car, the experience wasn't that great, but when I was looking at cars with my dad, and we went to some of these dealerships, I mean, the experience in these dealerships was off the charts, and the experience in some of these restaurants that I've been to, they're not always the most expensive restaurants in the world, but everybody in there cares. Everybody in there greets you. They say hello. What are you here for? Oh my God, that's so exciting. And they'll come back halfway through the meal and they'll be like, thank you again for celebrating your XYZ with us. And it's not just the stupid candle on the piece of, whipped cream at the end. It's the whole experience throughout. Oh, you know what? We had the chef make you a little something special because we know it's your anniversary. We had, here's a glass of wine on the house. It's something that our bartender really loves because of X, Y, and Z because we know it's your birthday. They cater to you in a way that makes you feel special. And those are the experiences where if you're truly adding that kind of value, you should be proud of what you typically charge. And you shouldn't hide behind it. And so when you're in this world of offering services, you should be proud of what your fees are because you're providing such a high level of value to the universe and to the people around you that you shouldn't hide behind it, and you shouldn't feel like you're doing something that's, I don't want to say disgraceful to you, but you should be proud of the services you're providing, and and the people you give them to should be excited about paying you whatever you are typically receiving.
And a lot of that is invisible, by the way, because it's a feeling, it's a thought that you project that people pick up on. So, I had in the very beginning, when I was working with clients, I would attract a lot of these people that didn't feel valued in their own personal life. And they kind of looked up to me, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not better they would think I was better than them. And really what they were picking up on is that I am comfortable in who I am and I know who I am. And so when it comes to the restaurant world or it comes to business, you really have to ask yourself, are you worth it? Because if you don't project the energy that you're worth what you're giving, people aren't going to feel justified in paying it. And it has nothing to do with what's written down or what they're receiving. It's really a feeling. It's kind of invisible what they're picking up. So it's a lot of internal work has to be done for you to project that energy. And the programming is what we're talking about. Programming yourself to believe that.
I think somehow or the other, that's a nice segment into what you wanted to talk about.
Yes, and so thank you. I appreciate that. And so we only have like 10 minutes left on this, so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about diagnosing yourself so you can have a starting point about maybe where you're stuck with your self-worth and your value. But I'm talking specifically about money. And so early on, I really struggled with pulling in large amounts of money, and I didn't understand why. And so I came across this wonderful meditation that I kind of tweaked and made it my own, whereas a little bit we're manifesting with the heart and less with the head, because I've worked with many clients and they're able to write down with their brain what they want to manifest, but when it comes to actually feeling that they're worth it in the heart, there's a huge block. And so a fun diagnosis is to kind of, I'm not going to do the actual meditation right now, but I'm going to walk you through it. And it's to sit still, take a few deep breaths, get really quiet, make sure there's no one around, and start imagining $1 coming into your heart. Now, most of us, that's not a block, right? So $1 coming through, streaming in through the front, taking deep breaths, and it's just kind of releasing out the back, right? So then you up the amount to $100, $500, $1,000. And that feels comfortable for most people, right? So we're in kind of a comfort zone. And then you get really big with the numbers. So I remember when I did this probably maybe 10 years ago, my number was $25,000. You know, in the big picture, that's not a lot of money. like if you make that in a year, that's not a lot to live off of, right? And so I started working on that. And so I would just, one day I would imagine $25,000. And I knew it was a block, and here's how I knew. My anxiety went up, like I didn't feel worthy of it. All these weird emotions came flooding in. I started crying. I mean, just a bunch of weird stuff started happening. And I said, okay, here's where I need to work farther from. So now I can do way large amounts now. I mean, basically I can do infinite amounts. And so amounts that don't even exist now, which is kind of fun, right? But it's self-diagnosing yourself to see what, you don't even have to know why those blocks are there. I mean, eventually that might come. It could be childhood programming, like you talked about, Vikram, but which usually it is, honestly. It could be past life stuff, but we're not going to go into that. That's just kind of a brief message. But really, you know, some of us take poverty vows, and we grew up poor, and so therefore we limit ourselves to how much we can actually receive. Now, you can also do that with items as well. So buying a house, buying a car, they're all visualizations, but I want you to get out of the brain and into the heart. And here's why. Because the heart has a magnetic resonance, which is what we can pull, that's 5,000 times greater than the brain. 5,000 times greater. So what that means is when we can kind of master kind of pulling and creating our own life and visualizations and manifestations through the heart, we're able to bring it faster. We're able to bring more. We're able to help more people. But a lot of us, unfortunately, have a lot of heart problems because of programming. And so I want people to hear this at any age and any direction of time. You can go back and we can talk about meditations on another show, about going back into those moments of our childhood when we were programmed and actually kind of reprogramming that, or just simply letting it go and reprogramming now. So what do you think about the heart versus the head? We can end on that. We have a few minutes left.
Well, in I believe it's Chinese medicine or Chinese culture, they believe that the heart is actually the first brain, because the heart is created before the mind is, or before the brain is.
Oh, so, look at that. I didn't know that. Fascinating info. Thank you.
Don't Google me this, or don't Google me. A lot of my general knowledge is just stuff I pick up from here and there, but so I could be wrong on it, and I didn't expect to talk about it, otherwise I would have tried to do some research. But if you try to get you always you have that gut feeling, that's kind of your heart telling you, like, hey, this is good or this is bad.
Actually, your gut has a mind too. Believe it or not, there are brain or neurological cells in your gut and your heart and your brain. Isn't that fascinating?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so. I know. Cool stuff, right?
I totally believe it. I mean, I was actually doing, as you were talking, I was doing the meditation and kind of seeing where my head started twitching, and it's interesting where it started twitching because that's kind of what I've net profited over the last couple of years.
Yeah, interesting, right? So that's where you start, and you just kind of increase the increments, wherever you want to increase it. And but yeah, anyway, go ahead. That's fascinating.
I would think that a man who makes $5 gazillion trillion gabillion dollars a year
he has no blocks.
Wouldn't have any blockages,
no.
Right?
Well, not where he's manifesting from. No, he could have a different sorts of blocks, maybe, but definitely his chakras might be overstimulated and working overtime and very large. So it's really interesting.
I totally believe that the heart is where it's really, truly the real power that we have as humans. And we've been, unfortunately, programmed to think that it's the mind that tells us what we can and can't do.
It's the brain, because the mind is different, right? So we have to reprogram how we look at the mind, because the mind is the whole body. It's not just the brain. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Take notes here.
Well, we're both learning from each other, and I think that's the beauty of this, as well as everybody else learning from our experiences. So,
but like the work that we've done together over the past 4, 5, 6 months, and the work that I've been doing on it always comes down to have a blockage in your heart area.
Yeah.
And that's what's holding you back. Like when you connect to your heart, you're going to have everything you want, because your crown chakra, your third eye, like your throat and your heart, though, those are not connected to the rest of your body. And it's funny because right now I have a kind of a sinus issue, but really it's not necessarily maybe a sinus issue, because I'm not like coughing up any of the typical sinus stuff. It's more of I had a pranic healer tell me, he's like, oh, you got a total block in your kind of sinus area. And I'm like, seriously, dude? Like, I'm getting tired of this spiritual crap. Like, on the head. But it's, and then he's like, oh, your heart. He's like, oh, you got a big heart. But, there's definitely some stuff around it that that needs to be figured out, and you can do it on your own, or you can do it through the help of somebody else. But when you start manifesting things through your heart, it's in my eyes, you're manifesting things through love. And when you manifest things through love,
it's the law of attraction. It's the law of attraction. You get it back.
You're being authentic. You're being real. You're being true, and you're not being deceitful. When you come from a place of, being real with people, I don't like to use the word authentic. I think it's such an overused term of bullshit these days. But when you're being really real, you tend to get really real things around you. And sometimes the realness comes in from people that you wouldn't expect, because they look different than what you're used to. They talk different than what you're used to. They sound different than what you're used to. But those are the people who are really real, and the people who are putting on this front, they put on this certain outfit, and I'm not saying it's a business outfit. It could be any of the outfits out there, but they put on a front because they're coming from a different place where they're trying to fit into something that they're not, and they're not being authentic with themselves, and they're not being authentic with the universe, and everybody can tell. So when you start to become authentic and you come from the heart, is when you truly start to manifest things that are authentic to you. And for some people that's lots of money, for some people that's charity work, for some people they find money to give to other charities so that they can travel to make the world better. It's all different stuff, but when you come from the heart, you really start to, your world starts to change in ways you would never imagine.
Right. Well, I think we should end on that. And I just wanted to tell everybody, thanks for listening to our new podcast. And we are The Odd Couple. And just remember to be kind to yourself and be kind to others. And we'll talk to you next week.
All righty. Have a great one. Peace out, everybody.